I'm Catherine Caroli, and I wanted to talk about how to practice etudes and what sort of standard we should set for ourselves when we practice etudes. So I'm pulled out Andersen Opus 15, and I thought we could just maybe go through the first 10 and come up with a practice plan and some goals. I don't take the tempo markings too seriously. Sometimes I think they're really reasonable, and sometimes I think they're more challenging than what we really need. But I do think there is a point to each etude, and it's important to understand what the composer intended for you to be practicing in order to really be successful. So the first etude in C major, clearly to me, is about the balance of registers. So with all these low notes going up an octave and a half, it's really important that our low register sound is as beautiful and rich as our upper register sound, and that our upper register sound isn't covered and flat. So I make sure I would practice this under tempo, listening to the beauty of the sound and making sure I'm not covering as I'm ascending. Etc. I think this etude is pretty self-explanatory, and I think the metronome marking of 112 is certainly not too fast. Obviously, evenness of fingers plays a role in this etude as well, as do the overall dynamics that are marked. Tricky thing in these Andersen etudes, and almost all of them, is figuring out where to breathe. I don't personally feel that these need to be performance pieces. I do think placing mindful breaths, however, is important. It's not possible, unless you're circular breathing through the whole thing, to not take time to breathe, but I think the breaths should be placed effectively and done fairly quickly. As far as the next etude, this one to me is more self-explanatory in terms of what the challenge is. It's clearly how to articulate these middle register notes and make the sound really beautiful. So this would be great to watch the video that I made about middle register articulation, since the first measure is full of articulated E's, in terms of getting a really great quality sound and immediate response on those E's. Again, I think the metronome marking here is reasonable, and the breath issue is not an issue. Or finding places to breathe should become a lot more easy, isn't a difficulty. The third etude is one of everybody's favorite, and I think the important thing here is to really bring out the melody. The melody has a shape in and of itself, and it's really important that you play it and play it musically so you understand what it is that you're accompanying when you add all the notes. So that you can bring out the melody but not play every tenuto note the same. It should match the way that you beautifully and musically play the melody. Here too, breathing is tricky. I think the breath should be mindfully placed, but it's okay to take some time to breathe. I don't think that's what the etude is about. As far as tempo goes, it's marked at metronome equals 48. Let's see. I think that's fine. You could go a little bit quicker, and it makes the breathing a little bit easier. So the number 4A and 4B, I'm actually going to talk about this etude in a separate post about playing low notes and going from high notes to low notes easily. I think, again, this is about balancing the registers. The tempo markings, I think, are fairly reasonable, maybe a little bit on the fast side, but this is really about getting control over your articulation and quality of sound while you're jumping through the registers. So that would be the goal here. Number 5 is very similar to number 1 in terms of what needs to happen. I think the tempo marking is reasonable. Number 6 is, I think, it's a fun one because there's actually some, you can really practice playing with a lot of character on this and practice playing these Baroque figures effectively. So for this one, at the tempo marked, clear control over the articulation, good quality dynamics, and then the middle section, again, is a lot like the etude number 3 in terms of what you're trying to achieve. Etude number 7, I think, is fairly straightforward, as is number 8. Number 9, again, is really about controlling the middle register and making sure that every note has a great sound on it. And then 9B, a way to practice your double tongue articulation. So I guess for me, what I advise my students when they're learning a new piece of music is to, first of all, be able to play the notes and the rhythms correctly, and articulations. Those 3 things absolutely have to be there. And I think a really important thing to do is to look for patterns. So, for example, if I look at etude number 4B, and this is a measure 25, that whole passage is fairly awkward, but I can simplify it. So I can simplify it by leaving out the double tongue on the first note of each group. Etc. I think this is a lot more effective than trying to play it because it's forcing your fingers to change over a little bit more quickly. Another thing that you can do here is a movable fermata practice. I think if you apply some of these more creative problem-solving techniques to your etudes, as well as your scales, as well as your excerpts, you'll find that you can make a lot more headway a lot more quickly. So I hope that gives you some ideas and encouragement about how to practice etudes, and I wish you good luck, and please, as always, send feedback or requests to katherinecaroli@gmail.com.